What up, everybody? March 18th, day 8th of the year-long Solitaire challenge, where I review random shit as I play Solitaire. Historical fact for today, 1965, the members of the Rolling Stones were all fined £5 for public urination. There's a fun fact. And famous birthday today, comedian Dane Cook. So, as you can tell by the background title and the deck of cards, I'm going to be talking about 2010 horror film The Crazies. It's actually a remake of the 1973 film of the same name by George A. Romero. Now, ever since 2003's release of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake, studios went on a feeding frenzy, eating up any available IP of, classic horror films they could get. And for the most part, they were all god-awful.
Shouldn't fall asleep in class.
And almost all of them retconned in some useless bullshit or backstory that wasn't needed in the original, like Michael Myers' abusive trailer trash stepdad in Rob Zombie's Halloween.
Give me a fucking break, he's probably a queer. He's gonna grow up, end up cutting his dick and balls off and changing his name to Michelle.
But in regards to The Crazies, I actually prefer it to the original. It's not a great movie by any means, but it's definitely enjoyable, and it's not terrible, so we're going to talk about it today. At the start of the film, there's a baseball game going on in the small town of Ogden Marsh, and we're introduced to several characters there, including the main character played by Timothy Oliphant, the Sheriff David, and his loyal deputy Russ.
Kid throws fast.
The only main character not at this baseball game happens to be the only productive member of society, David's pregnant wife, Judy, played by Rhoda Mitchell, and she's the town doctor, but she's about to miss a lot of excitement at the baseball game.
Stay there. Boys, get in the dugout.
David does his best to try and defuse the situation.
Oh, Troy. Now you're drunk. That's all. All right, let's just lay the gun down.
But that obviously wasn't going to work because we're only about 5 minutes into this movie.
Rory?
Now, what transpired at that baseball game obviously shook up the town, but that was only the tip of the iceberg for the poor citizens of Ogden Marsh. A character named Bill is later seen getting checked out by Judy, and he's very unresponsive, and she's kind of worried she doesn't know what's going on, and he ends up doing this later that night. Bill ended up taking out his wife and his son in the process. David gets called to the scene and Judy tags along with him, and they see Bill outside the house, totally unresponsive to what he has just done. He doesn't care, he's whistling tunes, and David knows something's up, and Judy knows something's up. So later that day, David gets called to a dead body found in the local water supply. It's like a spring. And there's also a giant military plane that crashed. So David comes up with this theory that there's something in the water, and it's causing the citizens of Ogden Marsh to change. So David ends up, this next scene's pretty cool. It's an homage to Jaws. David goes to Mayor Hobbs, and he pretty much demands that Mayor Hobbs shut off the water supply to the town, much like Sheriff Brody went to Mayor Vaughn in Jaws and told him to close the beaches. And in this situation, much like Jaws, Mayor Hobbs pretty much tells David to go fuck himself. David ends up shutting off the water supply, but it's too late, because not too long after that, all the cell phone reception in the town is cut off, and at night the military begins rounding up the citizens. David, his pregnant wife Judy, and Deputy Russell are amongst all the citizens rounded up by the military and taken to the local high school. It's here where David and Judy get separated because the military is dividing people that have a fever and that don't. And everybody that has a fever gets strapped down to a bed. Well, that's all we see. David ends up meeting up with Russell later at the sheriff's station. He goes back to get some guns, And Judy is unfortunately stuck in this situation. Now, yes, this is the beginning of the infamous pitchfork scene that they hyped the fuck out of in the trailer, and she's stuck there with side character I didn't mention until now because she's not really important, Becca. She works with her. And yeah, this scene is actually really intense, but my favorite scene happened at the morgue earlier in the film. I didn't show, but yeah, this scene's pretty intense. But of course, David and Russell show up and Deus Ex Machina the fuck out of this dude. So yes, David and Russell rescue Judy and Becca, and they get the hell out of there. I should have mentioned earlier that the Crazies overtook this makeshift military base somehow, even though it shows like 30 fucking helicopters full of soldiers, and yeah. Kind of stupid, but whatever. He rescues his wife, and Becca tags along, even though she dies in some car wash scene later, after a couple other run-ins with the Crazies. But then we're left with just David, Judy, and Russell aimlessly walking down this back road. This leads us to like the biggest scene of exposition in this entire movie, and it's clearly just written in here to tell us what the virus is. It's kind of ridiculous. It's pretty funny. David and Russell see a federal agent SUV rolling up the street, and David and Judy wanted to take the truck because they're stuck without a car, but Russell throws out like a strip of nails or whatever the fuck cops use and pops the tires, and the SUV flips over, and they begin to interrogate this dude. They end up learning that this was in fact a biological weapon.
You're telling me that you guys engineered this crap? It's designed to destabilize a population. In this case, the wrong one.
So David ends up reacting emotionally. And Judy, being a doctor, asks the logical question.
What is the incubation period?
48 hours. After that, you're either dead or you don't have it.
And Russell demonstrates that he is in fact starting to become infected. So after that, yeah, Russell's starting to become infected, and there's some more dope-ass interactions with the Crazies, but Russell ends up sacrificing himself, and Judy and David end up at a truck stop. There's also more interactions with the Crazies here, and they find out over a walkie-talkie that the government's pretty much gonna nuke the entire town, and we get one of the like most drawn-out endings ever.
Trigger engaged.
A few moments later. One eternity later.
Anything?
3 days later.
And then we see from like some computerized drone shot following them after they survive that truck crash, that the government is going to lock down the city that they're headed to. Overall, like I said, I enjoy this film. It has its flaws, but out of all the remakes, this one, it's okay. It's not bad. So with all that being said, I think I'm 7-1 now in the Solitaire challenge, and look forward to more reviews. Peace. Subscribe.